Greetings, everybody. This is our first day of notes for Unit 4, Forming the Government. This is the events that take place after the American Revolution. To end the first semester, we worked on a research project in which you research an important person, battles, or key technology used during this event. One thing I'd like to mention before we kind of start taking notes today is that after the Battle of Yorktown, which was a battle that a lot of individuals chose to research on, that really ends the overall fighting in the American Revolution in about 1781. The siege of Yorktown resulted in the British losing most of their army, and instead of financing to provide more troops, Great Britain has requested the United States to sit down at the negotiation table to bring peace. The treaty that ends the fighting is the Treaty of Paris from 1783, in which we send key diplomats such as Benjamin Franklin to meet in Paris, France to negotiate peace. The major outcomes of the Treaty of Paris allow the United States to become an independent nation. They are going to be able to occupy all the land leading up to the eastern coast of the Mississippi River. In a separate treaty between the British and the Spanish, both the Spanish and the French were allies for the Americans. The British are going to turn over Florida back to Spain, and Spain is also going to control most of the land west of the Mississippi River. Now focusing on Unit 4, throughout our time, we're going to be focusing on the Americans' attempt to establish a government to rule their new sovereign independent nation. They go through two different types of governments. The first one we'll talk about for the next few days is called the Articles of Confederation. And the lasting document that comes from this unit is the United States Constitution, which is what we use today to govern the United States of America. So just like last semester, you are going to view this PowerPoint presentation, copy down the slides as they are being presented. If I'm moving too fast, make sure you pause the video to copy the notes. Once you finish with the video, you are going to complete a very simple 5-question note check activity about some of the key points that were made throughout this lecture. So let's get it going. So forming a government all starts during the American Revolution. If we think back to Unit 3, we were introduced to the First and Second Continental Congress. During the Second Continental Congress, which was formed after King George III does not meet the demands from the First Congress, these delegates are going to urge all 13 colonies to replace these old colonial charters with state constitutions. Since they are going to be becoming eventually independent, they no longer want to use royal charters provided by Great Britain, and they want to have state constitutions that reflect the ideas of the Americans of this time period. Constitution is going to be a big phrase that we worked with throughout this entire unit. Constitution, as provided for you, is a set of principles and laws giving powers and duties to the government. So a lot of these states are going to have to work extremely hard to create new constitutions. States such as Connecticut have already had a constitution since the 1600s. One of the most longest lasting state constitutions that we are going to see today is Massachusetts, and that was formed in 1781. Most of these states are going to highlight 4 key items that are going to be used to govern their states, not only during the American Revolution, but well afterwards. The first thing that these constitutions are going to have is that they are going to have rules to protect the citizens. So kind of think of them as the laws that we have to follow today, which not only protects ourselves, but protects the rest of the citizens that we live with. The second is that laws are going to be established to protect those accused of crimes. So if an individual was accused of burglary, we are not going to assume they're guilty right away and throw them in jail. They are going to be given their due process, which will allow them to go to court and fight to prove that they are innocent. A lot of this stuff coming from these state constitutions are then going to be used to write the United States Constitution after the Articles of Confederation fails. The third is that some states are going to ban slavery. This is mostly going to be seen in the northern states such as New England territory because they do not rely heavily on free labor. Some states such as the South are going to allow slavery not only within their borders, but some of them actually allow it within their state constitutions. The fourth and final item that these state constitutions are going to have is the right to vote, which is called suffrage. Throughout the times of the colonial period, you had to meet certain requirements to be able to not only vote, but to run for office. Early on, you had to be a white male who owned property, to not only to vote, but to hold public office. In some states, we're going to see them get rid of some of these strict requirements. A lot of these states are going to allow any white males who pay taxes to be able to vote. In some state constitutions early on, we're going to see the right to vote be handed to women and free African Americans. Unfortunately, for those two groups, that voting right does not last forever. Women do not actually regain their right to vote until 1920, and African Americans do not receive their right to vote until about 1870, thanks to a constitutional amendment that we'll talk about here later on in the school year. We use the voting or suffrage in our United States Constitution to be able to vote on local matters, state matters, or federal matters, such as the presidential election. You must be at least 18 years old, 18 years of age, and you have to be a registered voter, which is going to be something that we do not cover in class, but is a very simple process. So for the most part, throughout these 13 areas or 13 states, we are going to see some type of these four items within their constitutions. After the American Revolution is over, after the Battle of Yorktown, George Washington has the urge to give up power of being the commander of the Continental Army and would like to go back to his family home in Mount Vernon, Virginia, where he is going to spend the rest of his time retired. Before leaving, he urges the founding fathers to establish a standing army, which will be used to protect the sovereign United States against foreign attacks. Even though George Washington carries a lot of clout and power, these founding fathers are not going to agree with George Washington. As George Washington makes his way back down to Mount Vernon, the remaining founding fathers, key people that we've talked about several times already this school year, are going to be in control of forming a government. Now, they want a government that is completely different from the monarchy rule that they had endured during the colonial times. They're going to look to form a brand new democracy, a brand new government, which will be democracy, in which the people have the power to govern themselves. On Tuesday, I do not know my days of the week, we kind of looked at 4 different types of governments, and we looked at 2 different types of democracies, representative democracy and a direct democracy. And we'll talk more about those as we get closer to the United States Constitution. So in order for them to build this democracy, they're going to rely on previous documents. They'll rely on philosophies from the Age of Enlightenment. They're going to piggyback on the Declaration of Independence, the Mayflower Compacts, and other important documents that were crafted before this time. Now, for the first government of the United States of America, it is called the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation was started to be crafted during the American Revolution. They formed a committee of 13, in which each state is going to have one delegate be in charge of drafting a government that is going to be used not only during peace, leading up to the American Revolution, but will be used throughout the duration to kind of keep everything governed so it does not turn into an anarchy, which is a place that has no government, no rulers, and really no sets of laws. So these individuals are going to spend several times or make several attempts to draft this document. It's not until the fourth draft that they're actually all able to agree that this will be the document that is going to be used to govern the United States during and after the American Revolution. Now it's time for us to break down what it means for the Articles of Confederation. So a simple definition for confederation is an alliance of separate governments, which will be these individual states that are going to pledge to work together to keep the United States to be successful. One of the big things that we'll look at as we get closer to the end of this lecture is that all the state governments are going to have a lot more power over the national or federal government, something they all really wanted, especially after dealing with the monarch of King George III. The main author of the Articles of Confederation was written by an individual named John Dickerson. He was a famous Philadelphia lawyer. He was an active member throughout the Stamp Act Congress, the First and Second Continental Congress, the Declaration of Independence. He would write several letters as if he's posing as a Pennsylvania farmer, in which he talks about the taxations passed by Great Britain onto the colonies and how we should take up arms to fight back. So he is going to call the Articles a firm league of friendship as each state works on trying to protect the sovereign nation of the United States. So the process of allowing the Articles of Confederation to take place is going to take quite some time. They are going to ratify it in the late 1770s, passed by Congress, and then is going to be sent to all 13 states to ratify or to officially prove the document. Even though this is all taking place during the American Revolution, it doesn't actually get ratified until much later. The main reason why is because Maryland is extremely upset with how things are going down here in the United States. So it's not until 1781 that we have all 13 states agree that they are going to utilize the Articles of Confederation to govern the United States. The major problem that Maryland had, as we can see on the map, is located right over here on the eastern coast, was that we have land that is already being claimed by states that have not been organized. This unorganized territory on the map is called the Northwest Territory, and that deals with a lot of the land that the area received after the French and Indian War. As we can look on the map, we can kind of see the overall size of Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia, which are extending far past their current border. The main reason why Maryland is upset is because these states such as Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, and some other northern states have already staked claims out there in that Ohio River Valley or that unorganized territory. Maryland is upset because it's very difficult for them to expand their border out into those territories, and they believe that it's not fair that they can increase their size by already claiming land in the unorganized territory. So a very predominant individual that we'll talk about for the next few units, Thomas Jefferson, kind of rallies states such as Virginia to give up their claims of this unorganized territory and promises that this land will then be turned into new states that will eventually be added to the United States. With this promise, Maryland agrees to ratify the Articles, and it is going to fully take place to govern the United States of America. We are going to look at 6 things about the Articles of Confederation. Some of these are really going to focus on the powers that is going to be given, not only to states, but to the federal or national government. Later on next week, we'll look at Shays' Rebellion, and we're going to use that rebellion to kind of highlight some of the key weaknesses of this first government. So one of the first things they were so focused on was trying to make sure they didn't establish a strong national government. They did not want to relive the torture and hardships that they experienced underneath the powerful control of King George III in Great Britain. They're basically going to wipe out all of the national government's power and give them to the states. So that's kind of where we see the firm league of friendship and how the states are going to promise to work together to keep the United States successful. So weak national government, more powers to the states. The second item is that the government is going to only have one branch, and it's called the legislative branch, which is a branch we have today, and which we call it Congress. Congress today is made up of two separate houses. We have the House of Representatives, which is based off of population. Then you have the upper house, which is the Senate, in which all states get equal representation, 2 senators per state. The legislative branch is really going to focus on making laws, making treaties with foreign nations, forming a standing army, and issuing coins and money. If you only have one branch of government, we do not see the existence branch of the executive branch, which is headed by the president, in which their main obligation is to enforce the laws, or the judicial branch, which we think of as our court system in the Supreme Court, which makes sure that all the laws that are being passed at the state and federal level do not step on the toes of your individual guaranteed rights. Number 3, it could issue money or borrow money. When we're thinking about borrowing money, we are focusing on taking out loans from other European countries, like the United States had to do with France and Spain to fight the American Revolution. They can issue money, but that's going to be a major problem because in order for money to be worth something, you need to have gold and or silver as reserves to back that up. Here are some images of a continental dollar, something we'll talk about as we progress through the next few units. Number 4, I stated in the last slide, they can make treaties with other countries. And in this situation, as we kind of progress through the rest of our school year, Native American tribes that are still living within the United States border is going to be considered a foreign nation. In order for them to give up their land and relocate, there has to be a treaty made between the United States federal government and the Native American tribe leaders. Number 5 is that they're going to be able to create an interstate postal system. So think of it as the United States parcel system, the USPS, the mailmen and women that deliver your mail on a daily basis, is all going to be funded by the federal government. And number 6 is going to have the power to make an army and a navy. A lot of these items that I mentioned are also going to be weaknesses. We'll talk more about the money issues that cause inflation, followed by a depression. And then we'll also talk about how even though the federal government has the ability to make an army and a navy, they do not have the funds to do so. And that's something that we'll talk about kind of later on in our units. That was the last slide for today. Once you have this slide copied down, you need to make sure you go back to Schoology, go back to our folder, and you are going to complete a simple note check questions about some of the topics that were covered in this lecture. Once you're done with the notes and with the note check questions, you are done for the hour, and I will see you guys all on Friday. Have a great day. That sounds good.